Three Things AI Can't Know, a brief epistemological survey of artificial intelligence's limitations by Kathleen Walker, April 2021. Well before I was acquainted with the term artificial intelligence, I knew the robot R. Daniel Oliva from Isaac Asimov's Robot series of novels, Hal from the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, and of course R2-D2, C-3PO, and all the droids from the Star Wars franchise. At the time, I didn't think of them as anything more than mechanical characters populating fictional worlds, but times have changed. Artificial intelligence is at this moment spell-checking my draft of the script, while on the West Coast, a powerful AI program named Morpheus at the University of California, Santa Cruz analyzes astronomical image data pixel by pixel to classify all the galaxies and stars in large astronomical survey datasets. Undeniably, AI continues to populate fictional worlds in the sci-fi genre, but AI is also part of life in the 21st century for nearly everyone. The algorithms that instruct a computer how to do what we want it to do, including the kind of deep learning employed by Morpheus, are becoming increasingly sophisticated. As a result, AI capabilities continue to impress and inspire, especially when they seem to mimic human intelligence. This is where the differences between the activities of the human mind and the computing power of AI begin to blur for some scientists, for the man on the street, and for some philosophers. The confusion and the controversy are not new. Descartes, Hobbes, Pascal, and Leibniz all tackled the question of whether the human mind is just a machine. Judith Graebener notes in her article entitled Computers and the Nature of Man, a Historian's Perspective on Controversies about Artificial Intelligence, that developments in sciences have always caused people to reevaluate their ideas of man and his place in the universe. The controversies persist as the notable achievements of AI raise questions about the nature of man. Can AI know things the way we do? If so, are we like them or are they like us? In this project, I will comment on a limited number of epistemological concepts with the hope of clarifying whether it is coherent to say AI knows anything. What does knowledge or to know mean? In philosophy, knowledge is usually regarded as undefinable. Kenneth Gallagher, author of The Philosophy of Knowledge, explains that knowledge is an ultimate and irreducible event and therefore cannot be conveyed in terms more fundamental than itself. Another word simpler than know to express that I, he, she, it, or they know does not exist. However, we recognize that there are different kinds of knowing for human beings. I know R2-D2 in a different way than I know my sister. I know how to drive a car, which is different than knowing how the car works. Therefore, when we speak of human knowing, we use the term analogously. To know means somewhat the same thing and somewhat a different thing, depending on the usage. And these different usages reveal the way I know something is not merely a mental list of objects and cold facts about each. Instead, when I say that I know something, I emphasize a personal dimension that exists between myself as the knower and the thing known that underpins all the ways that I know. In the same way, we understand that I know is used analogously for human knowing. Is AI knows also an analogous usage or something else? And is that usage coherent? Gallagher notes that knowledge may mean one thing in science and another in history, metaphysics, art, or moral experience, and that epistemology must reckon with this spectrum of signification. AI can't know reality. A report published by the Brookings Institute describes how AI makes use of experience within the context of fully or semi-autonomous vehicles. The fact that the authors put the word experience in quotes to describe how AI-enabled vehicles might transfer the entire corpus of their experience to other vehicles infers that the word is used analogously to human experience. Whether it is a fully autonomous vehicle or a smart thermostat, the AI's experience is limited to data received from sensory devices. An empiricist may assert that AI's sensory perception is itself a ground for knowledge, but any resulting knowledge attributed to AI's sensory devices does not result from the AI's experience, but from that of the programmer. Dreyfus explains that the programmer must provide a hierarchy of context and general rules for how the computer organizes bits of data received from the sensory devices. The AI, therefore, operates passively in a representational world of bits of data organized according to rules set by the programmer. Ultimately, it is the programmer's rules for organizing the data that may result in knowledge, and those rules are born of the programmer's experience. There is no personal dimension, no connection between the AI and the reality of things perceived by the sensory devices. In contrast, human experience is the active assimilation of reality through lived encounters in which we come to know better the essence of things. At each stage of human experience, thought takes our knowledge of essences and refines it with ongoing experience, reflection upon experience, and judgment of the meaning of that experience. Our immediate experiential contact with realities such as being, time, space, justice, and mind, which are not sense data, are not usefully understood from the side of sense data. We understand these as encountered reality, as experiences themselves. For AI, bits of stream data are woefully inadequate substitutes for the ongoing moments of human experience that we know as reality. AI has no experiential contact with either the objects of sense data or the encountered realities that transcend sense data. John McCarthy, the computer scientist responsible for coining the term artificial intelligence, notes, "Classifying scenes and other inputs need not assume that there is any reality behind the appearances classified. Morpheus, therefore, will process and categorize billions of pixels as its algorithms instruct it to, unable to distinguish the appearance of the pixels and the reality of the astronomical images in its data feed." With regret, McCarthy concludes that AI programming that ignores reality behind appearances will not lead to human-level AI. But John Paul Meenan asserts that regardless of whether the AI is human-level or not, computers will never be able to see and react to reality in all of its complexity for the basic reason that reality is not an algorithm. Bound by its algorithms, AI cannot enter into experience as encountered reality. Therefore, AI cannot know reality. AI can't know itself or that it exists. St. Thomas held that the self is only known reflexively in the knowing of the non-self. The knowledge of self and non-self is indivisible because a human being only knows itself by knowing the other. Interconnected with the knowledge of the self is knowing one exists. Gallagher explains that the very meaning of the statement, "I exist," is understood only by contrasting the I with the non-I. In this reflexivity, the self is necessarily social. We are made to both ask the question of our existence as a being in the world and answer it through the experience of interpersonal relation, by encounter with the other. According to the philosophers Martin Buber and Gabriel Marcel, the interpersonal relation is the essential relation of communion in which the I comes to know both itself and the presence of the thou as unique and unrepeatable revelations of being. Intersubjective knowledge is that by which we come to knowledge as the revelation of being, as a reflexive expression of who I am and my experience. You may guess where this is going. Having established that experience as encountered reality is not within the realm of AI's capabilities, we can conclude that AI is incapable of having the experience of interpersonal relation that reveals the I only in the presence of the non-I. Therefore, AI can never know itself as a thing that exists. Further, McCarthy notes that AI programming often employs a systemic theory that ascribes minimal beliefs to something like a thermostat. The thermostat doesn't need to know that it's a thermostat. It needs only to sense that the room is too hot or too cold. The autonomous vehicle doesn't need to know that it's a vehicle to navigate the route, road conditions, and obstacles around it. So for weak AI tasked with doing one job and doing it well, it simply does not need to know what it is or have any concept of existence to complete its task. Unlike human beings, AI is not created to ask the question about its existence as a thing in the world or answer the question in a reciprocal encounter with the other. Therefore, weak AI cannot even take the first step towards knowing itself. But what about AI specifically designed to mimic human intelligence, the kind of AI designated as strong AI? Currently, strong AI is theoretical and is of the kind that populates so many sci-fi books and movies. Even still, strong AI would not need to know it is AI or that it exists to do its job of mimicking human intelligence. So we have at least two arguments against AI knowing itself as an existing thing. It cannot experience the interpersonal relation that will reveal itself as an I in the presence of the other, and AI is not programmed to ask the question of its existence. AI can't know meaning. So here we will want to ask, what would happen if AI was programmed to ask the question of its existence? The question itself is meaningless to AI. Stanley Jackie notes that the symbols and functions of a computer are not the source of meaning. They are neither words nor components of thinking about the meaning they express, but are substitutive signs or means of not thinking about the meaning which they symbolize. In contrast, to know the meaning of a concept is, as St. Thomas suggests, a turn to the experiences they illuminate. Human thought as question in experience gives rise to concepts. The meaning of a concept is the product of a reciprocal exchange between thought and experience. Jackie explains that the computer's use of substitutive signs of symbols and functions is a means of not thinking. AI simply does not think. Therefore, absent both questioning thought and experience, AI has neither the means with which to formulate concepts nor the interplay between thought and experience to give meaning to concepts. AI cannot know meaning. Conclusion: AI can't know anything. The philosopher John Searle wrote, "The computer understanding anything is not just like my understanding of German, partial or incomplete, it is zero. As we have seen, AI cannot know reality, itself, and existence or meaning. Is there anything left that it could know? No, there is nothing left." As Stephen Barr explains, to bring all the process of a knowing being within a closed physical description proves to be impossible. Knowledge and the act of knowing cannot be reduced to data and algorithms or mechanical rules for organizing that data. Human beings come to know reality, self, existence, and meaning, among other things like goodness, truth, and beauty, only in and through ongoing experience in relation to the other. Further, Gallagher explains that knowledge is not something I have, but is the reflective expression of what I am or what my experience is. With no encountered reality as experience itself, AI has no ground for knowledge or knowing. So what do we make of statements that begin with "AI knows"? Searle explains that we often attribute this type of cognitive predicate by analogy to artifacts such as cars, adding machines, and computers. AI doesn't know in the way humans know, but we previously noted that another word simpler than know does not exist. At best, this problem is perhaps a limitation of language that finds us applying to know and knowledge analogously to AI because it's all we've got. What is less coherent, however, is how, at worst, the situation may be as Dreyfus suspects, an underlying epistemological assumption that human intelligent behavior is formalizable in terms of rules that can be reproduced by machines. And yet, an exploration of what philosophers, the man on the street, or the scientist means by AI knows or can't know, compared to human knowing, can serve to draw attention to the depth, complexity, and mystery of human knowing. Behind every successful AI is a human who knows.